Hello and welcome to the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. I'm Jeff Power, senior writer with RealTime Fantasy Sports. I'm joined once again by my coworker here at RealTime Fantasy Sports, Logan Glaser. Logan, thanks as always for joining me. Always fun talking with you. Looking forward to talking with you
Yeah.
again today.
And as always, thanks for having me on.
Oh, no problem, Logan. Wouldn't be the same without you. So each week, Logan and I, we like to preview all the games. We go through them quickly and we do a different category. Last week, we did players were fading. So this week, we're going the other directions. We're going to talk about our favorite plays from each game. So this isn't necessarily all superstars. It could be players that we like just because of their value, or we think they could have a big game and might not be thinking of them. But either way, these are going to be some of our favorite plays for week 7. Logan, this week there's 6 teams on a bye, so it gets a little tough when you're setting your lineups.
For sure, absolutely. And we mentioned this in our waiver video, how many pickups you kind of had to have because a lot of teams were pretty thin at positions this week. We do have several great matchups this week, but as mentioned, there's 6 teams on a bye. That's tied with week 13 for the most teams on a bye. So it's definitely a thin week. And we're week 7. We're halfway through the season for fantasy purposes if you're a 14-week regular season. So definitely a big week, especially with thin rosters.
Yeah, it's a make or break week for a lot of teams if you want to get it going and try to make that run for the playoffs. As you mentioned, as we already mentioned, 6 teams on a bye: Carolina, Cincinnati, Dallas, Houston, New York, Jets, and Tennessee. So a couple marquee teams, Cincinnati and Dallas, stand out to me, really good fantasy players on those rosters. So they're going to be missed this week for sure. So that'll be kind of tough to make some of those lineups, unfortunately. And we also want to talk about another game. So maybe if you're struggling, you're having some issues with your team, you might not make the playoffs, but you still want to win some money, play a different type of game. We're running our famous Super Shootout this week here at Real Time Fantasy Sports, Logan. It's a great game. It sells out every time we do it. We just opened it up and it's like 60% sold out right now. Tell everybody a little bit about that
Yeah,
game.
for sure. It's a pretty popular game, as we mentioned. We only do this every couple of weeks just to keep interest with it, but it will for sure sell out every single week we do it. It has sold out in previous years. It's $10 to enter, so only $10. You can have a max of 10 teams. Total, there's 550 teams in the tournament with that. So you get 8 players, a QB, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers / tight end, defense, and a kicker, and there's only 3 games to choose from. You can have a max of 2 players per NFL team. In those games, this week we've got Detroit versus Baltimore, Chargers versus KC, and then Miami versus Philadelphia. So 3 really good games on the slate, and it should be high scoring in all 3 of those games. First place wins $1,000, and then top 30 win at least $100, ranging from $100 up to the $1,000 grand prize.
And we do that intentionally. We pick these great games to have some good fantasy players for you to choose from. There's definitely some good ones in that. Again, Super Shootout. Go to rtsports.com. You can click on that Money League link at the top of the page. Get into Super Shootout. Just $10 to get in. Grand prize of $30. Of $1,000. I'm sorry. Just $10. Yeah, that's a great grand prize. No, just $10 to get in, grand prize of $1,000. And what I was trying to say is it pays 30 places deep. So that's what I meant with the 30 there. Sorry about that. Again, any players you want from 3 different games. It's a lot of fun, great contest. Again, go to rtsports.com, click on that Money League link, or you can do /super shootout if you want to get to it as well after rtsports.com/super shootout if you want to get in it that way. Again, get in that contest. A lot of fun. It will sell out, so do it sooner than later if you want to participate this week. Should be a lot of fun. All right, Logan, let's get into these games. And as always, if you have questions, we had all sorts of banter last week in our chat. It was a lot of fun conversing with you listeners and viewers out there, I should say. So if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to put them at all in the chat. We're happy to answer them, try to give you the best advice possible. So Logan, let's get into these games. First game is the Thursday night game tonight. Jags 4-2 at the Saints 3-3. Who's your favorite play in this matchup?
Yeah. So first, let's mention Trevor Lawrence is questionable tonight, so he's definitely a guy to keep an eye out. I think out of all the plays tonight, he's definitely one to keep an eye out for. If he does play, it truly going to be a game time decision on his status. But I'm going to go with Derek Carr as my play in this game. I do really like the Saints tonight in this matchup versus Jags, especially with Lawrence questionable. But this is a healthy Saints team now. Jamal Williams is going to be playing tonight, as just heard a couple hours ago with that. So I think he's going to be looking at some goal line carries that could also take some value away from Kamara. But Derek Carr, last week he had 50 pass attempts. He led the NFL in pass attempts last week, 353 passing yards, had a touchdown, and Jags ranked 23rd against the pass. So I really like him in this matchup at home.
Yeah, 6th most fantasy points allowed to fantasy quarterbacks this year, the Jags. So I like Carr too. I think that's a great call. My pick's Evan Ingram. So even if Trevor Lawrence doesn't play, I think he gets a lot of targets. But if Lawrence plays also, I think maybe he might not push the ball down the field as much. So I think that bodes well for Ingram. I think he has a really good showing in this matchup. He has at least 7 catches, 3 or 4 games. It's a weak tight end position. I think Ingram's about a must start if he's on your roster. Also, the Saints allow the 6th, or actually Ingram's 6th overall in tight end scoring. And the Saints, they're solid against the pass, but I think they can be had against the tight end a little bit. So I think Ingram's really set up for a good showing this week in that matchup. So I like him a lot there. All right, next game, Logan. Lions 5-1 at the Ravens 4-2. The last time the Ravens played, was it last week when they blew that game? Yeah, that was last week, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so they blew a game last week. They're at home now, play a Lions team that's 5-1, playing really well. So who do you like in this matchup?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Baltimore. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game, and that's why I'm going to go with Lamar Jackson in this. He's ranked 8th fantasy quarterback. His problem so far this year has been turnovers. He has 7 turnovers in 6 games so far, so that's definitely a concern. But as long as he can protect the ball, he's going to be an elite fantasy option. I think he's going to be the highest point scorer in this game. He has 4 rushing touchdowns on the year, 62 rush yards last week. So he's looking good on the ground and through the air. So I really like him to be the top point scorer in this game.
Yeah, I like Jahmyr Gibbs in this one. I know he's not 100% cleared yet. They haven't announced he's going to play, but it's sure looking that way. He's missed the last couple games with his hamstring injury, but now Craig Reynolds is beat up as well, so he might not play. David Montgomery's out. I know some people worry about Reynolds, going into a snap share if he does play, if he goes in the Gibbs snap share. But earlier in the season, when those two played together and split the backfield, Gibbs played 60% of the snaps compared to 29% for Reynolds. So even if Reynolds is active, I think Gibbs is a much better play. I think he's set up for a big showing this week, especially with Reynolds banged up as well. So he might not even play, and that's even better news for Gibbs. I think he gets a ton of work this week as a rusher and receiver. So I think he's set up for good things as long as he's active and playing. Keep an eye on the player notes for the latest, but I do think Gibbs is trending that way, and I would be excited to use him. He hasn't been very good to date, but this could be the week he puts it all together. All right, next game, Logan. Raiders 3-3 at the Bears 1-5. Bears train wreck right now. Justin Fields is hurt now. They're just going the wrong direction. I'm guessing you're not going to say a Bear in this game, but maybe you are.
So last week we were
Okay.
talking about Jeff actually went to the Minnesota-Chicago game.
Yeah.
We were saying how it's not going to be 2 great matchups, and this week we might have 2 backup quarterbacks for the Bears game. So you actually got a great matchup compared to this one. But I'm going to be going with Josh Jacobs. I'm going to be avoiding the Bears, especially with Fields out. Jimmy Garoppolo is also questionable in this, so that's why I'm going to go with Jacobs. Adams is a little bit upset with the Raiders just because of how he's being used with that. But Jacobs finally got over 70 yards last week, and that's the first time on the season that he's had that. He's really struggled with rushing yards so far. He's done well in the receptions and receiving yards, but he has really struggled on the ground. Last week, he finally got over that 70-yard threshold, and I expect him to continue that against a weak Bears defense.
Yeah, I think Jacobs is going to have a huge week as well. That's one of my favorite plays. It is my favorite play, but I'm actually going to say a Bear, surprisingly. Rashawn Johnson, so he's trying to return from a concussion. He still hasn't been cleared just yet. But do you trust anybody else in this offense with Tyson Bagent as their starting quarterback? I don't.
No.
So, yeah, so I am going to so I think Johnson, if he plays and he's active, which I think he has a good chance to be cleared before the week is out, the potential's there. He had 17.5 fantasy points in week 1. Raiders allow the 13th most fantasy points for running backs as well. I know Dante Foreman looked decent last week with his chances, but still, I think that Johnson's a much better back, and he has more 3-down potential. Also, Foreman does not catch passes at all. All right, we have our first question in the chat. What 2 to drop out of Mason, Judy, Jameson Williams, Zack Evans, and Tank Dell? Which 2 to drop
Yeah,
out
I
of
think it
that?
depends if you're going to be starting Zack Evans this week. It depends on your other running back options. I think if you have good other running back options and Evans is going to be on your bench, I think I'd rather drop him and keep like Tank Dell. But if you're going to be starting Evans this week, which is probably the reason why you picked him up, then I'm going to be keeping him. With that, I also do like Tank Dell. He's got a bye this week, so that's definitely a concern. Williams finally got a touch in the end zone last week. Judy hasn't been looking great, but there's a lot of rumors that he might be traded, so a new setting would be fine for him.
Yeah, agree.
So who are you going to be dropping, Jeff, out of that?
What am I missing with Mason? How come that's not clicking with me?
For 49ers.
Jordan
Yeah,
Mason.
it really
My
depends
bad. Jordan
on
Mason. Yeah, you're right. It depends on the situation. I mean, Tank Dell and Judy, I'm not dropping them. Dell's been really good. Jameson Williams, I think, is going to be really hit or miss. So, I mean, if you need the running back help, if you have some injuries at running back, I would keep Evans and Mason just because they have some potential. But if you have the running backs and you're not going to use them especially this week, this would be the week you probably would use them. I definitely think Evans is better than Mason just because Mitchell's there, and also Christian McCaffrey really hasn't been ruled out just yet, and they play Monday night. So, I mean, if you have to drop someone, I'd drop Mason and probably Jameson Williams out of that group. So that's what I would go with there. All right. Next game, Browns at the Colts. Browns coming off a big win with a backup QB in there. They're 3-2 at the Colts, 3-3. Who do you like here?
Yeah, I'm going to be going with the Browns defense as a player to team, I guess,
There you
to
go.
watch with that. So Cleveland's defense has looked electric, but for fantasy numbers, they rank 24th, which is not that great. So their problem, what they struggle with, is turning the offense over on downs. They've only forced 4 turnovers in 5 games so far. But they're going to be going up against Minshew, who struggles with turnovers. Last week, he had 4 turnovers versus Jacksonville. So I really like this matchup for Cleveland to get after Minshew and finally force some turnovers.
So I like Amari Cooper. I know that they could be going with a backup QB again, but Cooper's been getting it done with whoever's in there. He still hit the 100-yard mark last week. He has hit the 100-yard mark 2 of 3 games, 90-plus yards 3 of 4 games. He's getting it done on a weekly basis, in my opinion. He plays the Colts this week. They're 23rd overall against the pass, allow the 14th most fantasy points for receivers as well. So while I do think the Browns will run heavy with Ford and Hunt, I'm not shying away from Cooper, despite the issues at quarterback for the Browns. I still think he's a player I'm starting, especially in this matchup. All right, we have another question here. Start the Rams defense or the Bears this week?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Rams just because I think Steelers have one of the worst offenses so far. They have been terrible on offense so far. They've had some defensive touchdowns with that, but their offense has just not clicked yet. So I'm going to go with Rams. I know that the Bears might be facing a backup in Hoyer, but I'll be going with the Rams on that.
Yeah, I still just don't trust the Bears defense. I know they looked better last week, but still, they have not had more than 5 fantasy points, and they have had more than 5 fantasy points, depending on what your format is, in just 1 game. So the sacks have been better of late, but they still have 1 or no sacks 4 games. I just trust the Rams' options better there, so I would go with them. All right, next game, Bills at Patriots. Bills 4-2 at the Patriots 1-5. I mean, I'm not liking anybody from the Patriots.
No, I don't think I like anyone in any of these teams for this matchup. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. It's got a low total of 40.5 points, which is very low for a Bills team playing in this. Guy I'm going to be looking at is going to be Gabriel Davis. He's been on fire with touchdowns. He has 4 touchdowns in 6 games. He is very touchdown dependent, so it's going to come down to if he finds end zone. But that's guy I'm going to be looking at. But I'm going to be kind of staying away from both teams in this.
He's been finding the end zone a lot, though, so it's tough to keep him on the bench at this
For
point. He's
sure.
really been consistent, a lot more than the last couple of years when everybody thought he was going to be just a huge fantasy player. But he's finally come together this year. And
Yep.
I'm like you, I'm kind of shying away from especially Patriots, but with Buffalo, because I think they're going to win and win big. I'm kind of intrigued by Latavius Murray. I could see him getting some carries late. He's been getting more work as well. He actually pretty much split the work with Cook last week. They each played 49% of the snaps. Murray had a season high 12 carries. I do worry that he does not catch the ball, so that kind of limits his floor a little bit, but he could get the carries in this one. I could see him maybe finding the end zone as well. So kind of intrigued by Latavius Murray if you're looking for a running back to use this week. All right, we're getting more questions in here, Logan. Let's hit another one here. Start one at the flex. Craig Reynolds, Elijah Mitchell, or Jaleel McLaughlin.
If McCaffrey is ruled out, I'm going to go with Elijah Mitchell on that. I know he might be sharing with Jordan Mason, but I much rather have that share hold than such as Reynolds or McLaughlin with that. So if McCaffrey is ruled out, go Mitchell. Obviously, if he's not ruled out, it's going to be a toss-up because they don't play until Monday night, so we might not get news on McCaffrey until then. So it really depends if you want to take a risk with that.
That's going to make it rough. I agree with you. I definitely will go with Mitchell. I'm hoping maybe they have McCaffrey this owner. If that's the case, then I would just wait on that. But if that's not the case, I may actually play McLaughlin because Reynolds is banged up too. I don't know if he's going to play. And McLaughlin, he still had 9 touches last week, 12 touches the week before. He has at least 2 catches, 3 straight games as well. So I kind of like his floor. I think he's probably the safer pick over Reynolds. So I might lean that way. Unfortunately, with the Mitchell situation playing Monday night, that's going to screw things up for this owner. So that's the one negative there, unfortunately. All right, let's do another game, Logan. Commanders 3-3 at the Giants 1-5. Not a good looking game here.
Yeah.
Giants played well last week, but do you like anybody in this
Yeah, I'm gonna go
matchup?
with Terry McLaurin. So he has 26 targets in 3 games. So he started the year out kind of slow, but has definitely picked that up. Jahan Dotson has kind of just disappeared from the Commanders' offense. Yesterday, I actually just saw videos of him practicing for a kicker. So that's what he's kind of now down to. Last week, he only had 1 target on offense, and he was going ahead of McLaurin in some drafts at the end of the year, especially with McLaurin's injury with that turf toe with that. So it's definitely McLaurin's offense now is that number 1 wide receiver. You also got Curtis Samuel, who's kind of emerging slightly in that offense as well with that. But McLaurin is just such a consistent option. You can look for him to get at least 12 fantasy points and a good matchup against the Giants.
I agree. I like McLaurin too. I'll give you a Giant. I'm intrigued by Wan'Dale Robinson. He's really been playing a lot better lately. 8 catches for 62 yards last week, has at least 5 receptions, 3 straight games, and 4 every game this season. Washington allows the 6th most fantasy points for receivers, 27th overall against the pass. So I think Robinson keeps it going in this matchup, one that I think the Giants could be playing from behind. All right, let's get to another question. They're coming in fast and furious today, Logan. Should I trade Saquon and Cortland Sutton for Jamar Chase? Tough one.
Yeah, if you're fine at running back, I'd say go for it. I think that is a good trade. I think Jamar Chase is definitely an upgrade over Saquon and Sutton. I think Sutton's also going to be on the move, as I've kind of been hinting at with the Denver wide receivers. But I like that trade if you do have backup options to Saquon. Of course, running back is a scarce position, but if you can easily fill in for Saquon with your bench piece, then I say go for it.
Yeah, I'm guessing this owner's not using Sutton unless it's a really deep league. So it's basically Saquon for Jamar. Sutton's kind of a throw-in, probably a bench piece. You're right. It comes down to roster composition for me. If you have pretty good running backs and you're feeling good there, I would go with the trade because I think Chase is going to be the safer play on a weekly basis, just because of his floor. So I definitely would do it. Again, it kind of depends on your roster composition, but if you're decent at running back and you want to go with the safer of the 2 options, I would make the trade because I think Chase is that guy. All right, let's do another game, Logan. 3-3 at the Bucks, 3-2. A heated NFC, what are they, South, right? NFC South battle here.
Yeah.
So this could be for first place, I guess. These
Yeah,
two, whoever, Who would have thought that? Who do
Both
you
teams
like
are on
here?
the playoffs with that, but I'm going to go with Chris Godwin. He's had back-to-back weeks leading Tampa Bay's wide receiver over Evans with that. He's not found the end zone yet, so that's his only concern so far. But he only has 1 week where he has scored less than 10 fantasy points. He's been a very consistent option, along with McLaurin, who has I mentioned in the last game. But I really like those consistent options, and I think he finds the end zone for the first time this week.
I like that too. I think Godwin's a really good pick. I like Drake London too. He's really starting to kick it up after a slow start to the season. He's 11th overall in fantasy receiver score in his last 3 games. He has 11 plus fantasy points all 3 of those games as well. He was targeted a season high 12 times last week. Bucks also, they're looking like the Bucks of old, where they're really good against the run, but not so good against the pass. And that's kind of the case right now. So while Falcons are a good running team, I think they might be forced to throw the ball. Bucks just 26 overall against the pass. So I like London in this matchup. All right, let's do another question. Ridley, Olave, DJ Moore, and Rice need to sit 1. DJ Moore has quarterback issues. Ridley and Olave play on Thursday night. I kind of know what I would do here, but let me get your thoughts first.
Yeah, I'm going to be sitting Rice. That's my personal opinion on what I'm going to do with that. He only has 2 games that he's had over 33 yards so far in the season, so he's still pretty hit or miss with that. He looked a lot better last game. He had 4 receptions for 72 yards, but I think the other 3 are just too elite to be sitting them. I've got no problem with them playing Thursday night as well. I think a little bit concerned with Trevor Lawrence with that, but I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I'm definitely starting Ridley and Olave. It comes down to Moore and Rice for me, and I just think talent wins out here. Rice definitely is playing better, and I like him going forward as well. I think he could be more involved, but he hasn't gotten a ton of targets to date. He's kind of been hit or miss in that area. He's made a couple big plays, which helps his fantasy numbers, but I think he is the scarier option of the 2 when it comes to the floor. So I think he's more boom or bust. I would probably lean more here. All right, let's do another game, Logan. Steelers 3-2 at the Rams. 3-3. Rams playing a little better than I thought. Who do you like here in this? Who do you
Yeah,
like
so the
fantasy
guy I'm
wise?
gonna select for this has probably been the worst fantasy pick of the season so far, and that's Najee Harris. He only has 1 game above 7 fantasy points. He's getting the volume, he's just not producing. So that is encouraging if you're still a fantasy owner. The volume is still there. He has 10 plus rushes in the last 4 games. Last week he had 19 rushes with that. He just hasn't produced, and I do think this is going to be a favorable matchup against the Rams. As I mentioned before, I probably want to have the Rams defense just because the Steelers have struggled so much on the offense. But if I had to pick a player on that Steelers offense, I'm going to go with Harris just because the volume has been there, especially inside the 5.
Volume definitely helps. I agree. Volume is good, and you can't ignore that, especially when it comes to carries and catches. So I think that's a good call. I'm intrigued by Zack Evans this week. So as we mentioned, 6 teams on a bye. You're looking for running back help. I don't think the backups scare me too much there with Royce Freeman. So I think Evans is going to get a chance to run with this week, at least this week. So I'm intrigued by him, and I might give him a shot if I'm looking for some running back help. Steelers 12th most fantasy points allowed to running backs, 29th overall against the run as well. So I think Evans could help fantasy teams here. All right, we got a trade question. I'm 5-1, traded Pittman for Jefferson. My receivers are CD, Keenan, McLaurin, D-Hop, Palmer. Was this a good trade? So I'm guessing they got Jefferson. Is that what you're
Yes.
getting from it?
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's a good trade, especially since you're 5-1. I think a lot depends on where you currently are at. And if, since you're projected to make the playoffs, even if you lose your next 2 weeks at 5-3, you'd still be positioned pretty well, depending on how many teams make the playoffs and the format. But when Jefferson comes back, you're going to be looking pretty good for the playoffs.
I agree. I think it's a good trade. He's probably not using Pittman much with that depth at receiver, so I'm good with that. I think that's a good move. Good job there, GM. Amon Celtics. All right, next game. Cardinals 1-5 at the Seahawks 3-2. Another barn burner of a game between 2 NFC East teams. Who do you like fantasy wise here?
Yeah, kind of another player that's kind of been a bust so far this year in fantasy, and that's Jackson Smith and Najigba. But targets have not been bad for JSN. He only has 1 game where he has under 5 targets, so he's been getting looks. But the problem is he runs small routes, so he's only averaging 22 yards per game. It's just those quick routes that he's been running. He has not found the end zone yet. I do think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I think this is a great matchup for if you have anyone in fantasy, especially a lot of people are going to have a lot of Seahawks, and it's a great matchup, especially for them against Arizona's defense at home. So I'm going to go with JSN as a pick.
I like that. I think it'll be high scoring as well. I love Kenneth Walker in this matchup. He's actually my number 1 rated back this week, but I'll give you somebody else. I think Marquise Brown's going to have a good game. He's really been producing this year, even without Kyler Murray. He's still 19th overall in fantasy receiver scoring. He has at least 16 fantasy points, 4 of 6 games. He gets a volume like we've mentioned in the past here recently. He has double-digit targets all but 2 games. Seahawks, they allow the most fantasy points to receivers as well, so I think Brown really does well in this matchup. We're getting up against the clock a little bit, Logan. Let's do another question quickly. Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, Jeff Wilson, Rashawn Johnson need 2 in a PPR league. I'm kind of thinking Najee and Javonte personally.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same. I think Jeff Wilson is for sure out for me until he comes back and has a decent week from that injury. So I'm definitely going to be fading him. Rashawn, he's still questionable. Last I saw, he was still in that concussion protocol. I don't know if he was out today, but definitely a guy to keep an eye out for. But I'm still going to go with Harrison Williams.
Yeah, I like Johnson. As I just mentioned, he was one of my players to start, so I think he's really intriguing to me. But I still think Najee and Javonte are probably the safer of the 2, have a higher floor, so I would lean them. But if you want to take a chance, maybe play Johnson over Harris, who you just suggested, because he hasn't done a lot this year, but I could see maybe taking a chance there. But I would probably go Najee and Javonte. All right, let's go to another game. Let's move on to some of these better games here quickly. So Chargers at the Chiefs. I skipped over that Broncos game. We'll do Chargers Chiefs right now. Chargers 2-2, Chiefs 5-1. Should be a really high scoring game. Who do you like fantasy wise here?
Yeah, it's a chalk play, but I'm going to go with Austin Ekeler. Last week he struggled a little bit on the rush coming back from the injury. 14 rushes for 27 yards. He was facing a good elite defense in Dallas. He can get it done through the receiving and rushing, though. Even though he had a terrible rushing week, he still managed over 10 fantasy points because of receptions and receiving yards with that. First game, he had 117 rushing yards for 27 fantasy points. I think it just took him a game to get back in the swing of things, but I like him this week.
Yeah, I do too. I like Josh Palmer a lot, so I'll give somebody a little deeper dive. He has at least 7 targets, 3 straight games, really been taking advantage of that Mike Williams injury. He's been the better player over Quentin Johnson, who can't really find the field for whatever reason. I think his floor is really solid right now. He'll be in a high-scoring game, so I think Palmer's a good play here. All right, Dolphins 5-1 at the Eagles 5-1. Should be an outstanding game. I'm guessing, like me, you have tons of players you like in this game. Who's your favorite?
Yeah, I'll load up everyone in this game is basically what it'll be. The over-under is 51, which is by far the highest on the slate. With that, the next highest is 48 in that Chargers-Chiefs game. So definitely stack everyone in this game, but I'm going to go with Jalen Waddle. Eagles ranked 28th against the pass. They have really struggled against the pass, and that is what Dolphins are going to excel at with Hill and Waddle with that. So I like Waddle in this. He has 19 targets in the last 2 games, 33 fantasy points. A lot of attention is going to go into Tyreek Hill with his speed, and I think Waddle's a great number 2 option on that offense. So
I'm starting everybody, so I'm going to make it easy. I'm just going to say that. I'm going to start everybody in this matchup. Think they're going to be great. Let's do one more question before we get out of here. Do I start Algier and Bijan together? I'm thin at running back. I'm fine with that. Algier has double-digit carries 4 games, so the volume's definitely there. If you're thin at running back, I don't think that's a bad play at all, especially in this game. As we just mentioned, we think it could be high scoring. What do you think, Logan?
Yeah, I'm fine with that as well. Yeah, if you're thin at running backs, Algier is a fine running back 2 option. Perfectly fine starting him with Robinson.
All right, Logan, we didn't get to all the games, unfortunately, but we got through just about all of them. I think we missed 2, but a lot of fun talking with you today. Should be a great week of action. Again, as we mentioned, 6 teams off. Don't forget to get in the Super Shootout this week. It's at RealTime Fantasy Sports, rtsports.com/super-shootout. Logan, thanks again for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, Jeff.
Thanks to everybody for watching out there on another edition of the Real Time Fantasy Sports Show. Have a great week.